As we see in this photograph, to the left we see 8-inch rays on the block wall at the top of the wall. Each step up is 8 inches. One of those blocks is 8 inches high by 16. So we see 4 of those raises. Now in this design, as we will see in the next picture following, the back of the bond beam of the pool was raised to accommodate the 40 inches that was needed. But in this photograph, what we see here is the need to contain the raised elevations as we travel back to the final raised bond beam of the rear of the pool. So this was done with a slight lawn grade, as we see the chase lounges are laid out to show an angle of a slight slope in the area that transitions up 8 inches. From then on, what we did in this design was we used a small masonry wall that started at the base of the wall and traveled to a column housing those 2 steps, equaling 12 inches. Then from there, it travels back about 4 feet, where we call out for another 6-inch rise. Then finally, in the next photograph, we will see the spa is elevated again 6 inches to give us containment of the grade as we travel back. But it is important to use walls and string lines and paint on the ground to mark where there needs to be a rise, and then use lines to create steps and walls. And after a few times, you'll get a good idea of what it's like to get to the point where you feel that you're containing the grades in the proper way for the proper design. So as we see in our next clip here, the beyond the column, we see the 2 steps. We see that we've elevated the swimming pool 6 inches as we see it traveling to the right of the photograph. Beyond that, at the plus 12 area, we see that all the way to the spa. Then we see the spa elevated another 6 inches, and all of these are butted up against a slight little masonry wall that's at the base of the wall to contain that last grade. To the rear of the pool, we do see an elevated 30-inch plus raised bond beam with a cap. And that will allow a slight berm behind that to the wall, but that contains this elevation all the way to the other side of the swimming pool. So as we see the rear raised bond beam of this swimming pool, we can see that the bond beam carried down all the way to the other end, containing that raised elevation behind the pool, with a slight little waterfall in the middle to break it up. These type of features can be done anywhere along the bond beam. But the point is that each grade needs to have containment. And that is what you should first determine when designing a swimming pool. All these containment points are a must in designing your swimming pool. So start with these and then start with the shape. In this particular design, we see the need for elevation changes to equal nearly 7 feet. This was done by placing the pool about 13 feet away from that upper deck area, with a bond beam raised of 2 feet, and then containing steps along both sides of the pool down to a 0 elevation. But you can see the steps down took away most of that elevation change. And the reason is because in design, we really do not want a 7-foot high bond beam for a lot of reasons, for safety, for the look, and transitions. What we did here was we designed a beautiful stairway down using steps, and that took up about 5 feet of the elevation change. And we flanked those with planter areas for foliage and trees. And then go ahead and start there with your elevations, trying to minimize the zero elevation to your highest bond beam at about 2 to 3 feet. That works best, as you can see here. Viewing this same pool from another angle from up above, we see the elevation of the swimming pool and then the flat area beyond it where the swimmers would swim. And then beyond that, we see a small wall. That is a retaining wall within this downslope project. That balustrade wall is about 3.5 feet high, but it's setting on a 4-foot high retaining wall supporting that side of the swimming pool. So you can see that there was a lot of grading that needed to go on within this site, but it can be done using retaining walls and steps for even the most severe downslope conditions. Continuing with downslope designs, we see in this picture a negative edge. Negative edge swimming pools do run a little bit more to build, but they sure do add for a beauty that is unlike any other. Take the elevation that you see at the top. It's about 4 feet high, 3 or 4 feet high above the negative edge basin. But it sure takes care of a lot of grade very quickly. When considering a zero or a negative edge pool, again, it's always good to lay it out on the ground to determine where these elevations would change before committing to a design. This way you can make changes as you go along. Upside down paint sure is an inexpensive way to erase rather than reconstructing a swimming pool. So take your time in a negative downslope condition environment. Make sure that your elevation points and the view of those desired design implements are going to be what you're going to want to see. And in this case, we see a very beautiful negative edge viewed from a walkway. It gives a stone raised wall and a waterfall look, but it took care of the grade requirement of this site condition, and that was what was needed. Here is another negative edge pool that was drawn into a plot that was a downslope. This gave a 15 to 16 foot wide swimming pool at the zero elevation just outside the door of the home. Then following from that point, the 17-foot point, we dropped the pool down almost 4 feet to a basin at the very base of the pool. Now, this really allows for a beautiful look from within inside the house. You look across the water and you just see the water disappearing right out into the nowhere. So these pools, again, have a little bit of an additional cost, but it does show you that utilizing a downslope in this way can be very beautiful.